What's up YouTube, Chenzo here, and today I'm going to show you how to make a Chicago deep dish pizza. Now, if you've ever been to G-Fest, you probably have heard of this pizza. It is definitely my favorite pizza of all time. And yeah, let's get right into it. Alrighty, to start things off, I'm currently making the Cheetah Sauce for the Chicago deep dish. Now, with making pizza sauce on any pizza, you tend to start the day before, simply because you want to let the flavors marinate overnight. It gives you a much better tasting pizza in the end. Now, what my recipe calls for is a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, a 12-ounce can of diced tomato, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 2 teaspoons of minced garlic, a pinch of sea salt, a little bit of plucked basil leaves, or you can do a tablespoon of basil, half a teaspoon of olive oil, and half a teaspoon of sugar. Now, I want to recommend a couple things. For the 12-ounce can of ground tomatoes or tomato sauce, I recommend going a little bit higher than 12 ounces simply because in this pizza it barely covered the pizza. It still covered it, but not to my liking. Usually with every Chicago deep dish there's like about a centimeter of sauce on top of the pizza. It's just a preference. It doesn't really matter. And you can go a little bit more with fresh garlic, like 2 garlic cloves I used in this video. Like it's fine with me. Like it tastes good. And you can use a sprig of oregano in place of a teaspoon or a teaspoon of dried oregano. But yeah, that's basically me making the sauce. What I used to mix it was in this video is basically just smashing it with a fork like you would do with guacamole. Usually the way I used to make it is just put it in a little mini food processor and just pulse it for every 5 seconds on and off. Either way is fine with me. Like whatever floats your boat, you're good. Alrighty, and that's pretty much it. Alright, one little addition I forgot to add. When mixing your pizza sauce, you only need to mix it until it's just blended, not puree it. Just mix it until you see all the ingredients just blend together and it's not like a soup. You still want it to be a little thick. Alrighty, so now we're moving on to making the Chicago deep dish dough. Now in this video I will be using a bread machine for this recipe, simply because I believe in making any pizza dough or any dough of that matter, using a bread machine is a lot easier and faster than a KitchenAid or any kitchen mixer. Because for this bread machine it takes me about 5 minutes to mix the dough, whereas if I use the KitchenAid or kitchen mixer it takes me about 10 to 15 minutes. Okay, so what the recipe calls for is 3/4 cups of warm water, which is basically a little bit warmer than your finger. That is perfect. 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, 1.5 teaspoons of kosher or sea salt, 1.5 teaspoons of instant yeast or bread machine yeast, 3 cups of unbleached all purpose flour, 1/4 cup of cornmeal, stone grind, the smaller the better, or polenta, 3 tablespoons of olive, corn, or vegetable oil, take your pick, 1 tablespoon of vegetable shortening, and 1 tablespoon of unsalted butter, both cut into little bitty pieces. And that's it for the recipe. The way I go about adding the ingredients or mixing it in the bread machine, I always go liquids first and then the dry. So what you want to do before anything or adding anything to the pan is you want to mix the yeast with the warm water and also a half a teaspoon of the sugar, and then just mix it and wait until it dissolves. Now while you're waiting, you want to give the pan a little spray of olive oil or Pam, just a little coating, not too much. And then when it is dissolved, you want to add that to the pan, and then you want to add the oil, the rest of the sugar, the flour, the cornmeal, and then the salt and butter, and then the vegetable shortening. Yep, that's it. in that order. And then all you have to do is just turn the bread machine on for 5 minutes and just wait. And that's pretty much it. Oh, also, I had the video of me folding or kneading the dough. That's the technical term. But somehow it just got corrupted and I can't. But all you basically do is just you take one end and then the other end of the dough, and you just keep forming it and folding it into a ball. It's a form called kneading. It's I don't know exactly how to explain it. You just keep grabbing it and pinching it and then folding it into each other until it forms into a ball. And then after you fold it into a ball, it takes about 5 minutes. The less you knead, the better, I believe. I don't know how to explain it. It just forms better that way. But yeah, after you're done kneading it into a ball, you want to take a bowl, take a little drizzle of olive oil or any oil, just as long as it's olive, corn, or vegetable, and just coat the bowl in it. Not too much, just a light coat is fine. And then what you want to do is just take that dough ball and just coat it all around. Make sure the entire thing's coated, and then wrap it up in plastic. Like saran wrap is best. Also, press it seal is fine too. And then you let it sit for an hour. And then after that, there's either two ways you can go about it. You can put it in the fridge and let it rise overnight, or you could actually just let it rise for another half hour, and then just put in the prep it for the oven that day. My preferred method is letting it sit in the refrigerator overnight, because it tastes a lot better to me that way. The crust, it forms a lot better for me. Like, it's a lot easier to work with coming out of the fridge than just letting it sit. I think the word ferments comes to mind when I'm trying to say. But yeah. And then yeah. That's pretty much it, I think. Yep, that's it for the making the dough. Alrighty, so now we're working on shaping the dough ball into the form of a pizza for the pizza pan. Now, what I do first is I take a softened stick of unsalted butter and just rub it on the pan like you would deodorant, basically, until the entire pan is coated with butter. And then next you want to sprinkle the bottom with a little bit of flour. Now, first things first, I like to recommend not using newspaper as a mat. I have a dough mat. It was in the dishwasher and I was just being impatient. But the dough kept sticking to the mat so much that I actually just took out the mat and just used the table. I like being a cleansy guy, so that's why I tried using a mat instead of just the table, because I don't like making a mess that much. So that's just me. But yeah, let's get back to the video. The pan measurements, I believe, are 10 inches by 2 inches, I think. And so because of that, you want to flatten and spread out your dough evenly to about 14 to 16 inches. 14 is better, I think, because it's only 2 inches above the rim, and that's where you want to be. So it curves around, or it actually... Yeah, that's the right term. Curves around the edge, the rim, so that way it's a little easier to spread and flatten it inside the pan. So what I'm doing is just flattening it first and just evening it out with my hands. You could also use a rolling pin, which I think is a lot easier. But if you do use a rolling pin, I always recommend coating it with flour. Makes everything a lot easier. You could also use a little bit of cornmeal if you like. But yeah, just flatten it into a circle basically, and just spread it out evenly. Make sure you don't make sure you don't make it too thin. You want it a little thick, basically. But if there is like a couple spots that thin, it's fine, because later after you will have some pieces, leftover pieces that cut off around the rim and the end. You could just patch it like an actual pie. But yeah, that's okay. And coming up, it should show me putting the dough in the pan. It's pretty easy. You just put it right over the pan and you just shape it in this form of the pan. You just want to flatten it. Make sure there's no air underneath that dough, because it will form some air bubbles while cooking. So you want to make sure that the thing is completely airless. And you see that hole, that is fine. Just make sure, yeah. I do use that piece, most of that piece later, just to make patches like an actual pie. You just want to flatten it and rotate it as you flatten it. Make sure it's thin enough, but just thin, not too thin, if that makes any sense. But you want to just press it against the pan and just make sure it's good. The reason why you want it to be thin is because you want this pizza dough to hold up all the toppings and the sauce and the cheese while cooking in the oven. Because if you put it too thin, it will fall through and it won't cook properly. Like that, it'll still taste doughy, like, because it'll just all seep down to the bottom, possibly cook through the crust, and you don't want that when you're cooking your pizza. Okay, so now what I'm about to do is starting to add the toppings on my pizza dough. Um, what I'm going to do first is add a thin slices of provolone on the crust before I add any toppings. For the toppings today, I think I already said it, but I'm just going to say it again. I'm going to be using pepperoni on the bottom of the pizza, and then green peppers and onions on top of the pizza. And when I'm adding the provolone, make sure you want to curve it up, like along the crust on the edges, so you get that good the provolone taste throughout the entire crust, so it cooks into the crust. It gives it an extra boost of flavor to me. Not everybody does this, but it's just my preference, so you don't have to do it. You could just do mozzarella, and that's fine. When you're adding mozzarella, I used about 16 ounces of it. And I'm pretty sure they sell 16-ounce bags of mozzarella. I'm pretty sure of that. But I had a big bag of mozzarella. I just had to get rid of it. And when you're adding cheese, make sure you want to do the skim milk mozzarella or skim cheese. I forgot the term of it, but it's not whole milk. Do not use whole milk because it will make it the pizza droopy or too wet. It'll seep through the crust and make it sloppy, and you don't want that. You want it to cook nice and perfect. And I just added a little bit of mozzarella in between the cracks of the provolone, just so it covers the entire bottom of it before you add the toppings. But yeah, and I think I'm getting ready to add the pepperoni to it. And then after I add the pepperoni, I'm going to add more cheese, just enough to cover the pepperoni, and then I'm going to start adding the sauce. Alrighty, so now what I'm going to start doing is chopping my green peppers and onion. And I like to make a little note. You could always do this before. You even start the pizza, you could just put it, chop it up, and just put it in the fridge. It's fine. It's always important to be prepared, and I kind of wasn't, because I was just laid back today, and I just waited till the last second to do all this. I mean, it still came out right in the end, so it's all good. And right there, that little tool that I have is a vegetable chopper. I got it at the thrift store for like $5. It is very handy. You could probably find it at any grocery store, I believe, or any kitchen supply store. Basically what it does is you just put the vegetables on top of the little that steel where you see that little green thing. There's like a little steel square cutter on it. Basically it's like a French fry cutter for vegetables, like, if that's the simple down version for it. Yeah, after I make the pepperoni, or put the pepperoni on the pizza, I think that's where I start chopping the vegetables. And all you do for that little tool is you just put the vegetables on top of it, make sure they're cut so enough just so they fit on that square, and then you just push down and it just cuts it all for you, so it makes it a little faster for cutting vegetables. And I love this thing, so I recommend you get it. I also like to make another note. I'm only using 1 green pepper for this recipe, and about half of a Dahlia onion. Again, you could use whatever toppings you like for your deep dish pizza. Whatever your favorite is, go for it. I should be coming near to adding the sauce and the rest of the cheese, and then the sauce to this pizza coming up. Alrighty. Okay, so now what I'm doing is adding the rest of the cheese to the pizza. Just enough. You only need enough cheese to cover the rest of the toppings. And then, because you still need room to add the sauce to the pizza, I recommend probably about 3/4 of an inch to an inch of crust to show, just as a mark to add the sauce. And when adding the sauce, you probably need a flat topped or a flat spoon ladle, I mean. Sorry. And when you're spreading the sauce, make sure you do it in a spiral motion. It just spreads out evenly. You don't want to mix up the cheese. You want it to look like a deep dish. It just look nice. Also, I like to make another note. Usually when I make a Chicago deep dish, I add a sprinkle of Parmesan or Parmesan Romano cheese on top of the sauce. but since I'm adding green peppers and onions on top, it wasn't really necessary. But that's the traditional way to cook a Chicago deep dish, is with the Parmesan. And I'm getting ready to put it in the oven. Now the oven's already preheated to 450 degrees an hour prior, because I have a pizza stone, and you want to make sure that's preheated an hour, because using a pizza stone with any pizza is just awesome. Like, I recommend getting one if you make pizzas a lot. It's just a good cooking tool for pizzas. Now, when cooking a Chicago deep dish, the time I do it is about a half hour, and you want to rotate it every 15 minutes. And when you rotate it, make sure you rotate it 180 degrees. Just turn it like halfway. That's what I mean. But yeah, that's pretty much it to it. When it's done, it'll probably have like a little burnt edge to the crust. You don't want it too burnt. Just like the tip of the crust, it will be burnt. Like it'll show a sudden brown or maybe blackness, and the green peppers and onions have a little brown tint to them, like the crispy edges on it. And yeah, you just take it out, cut it probably with a classic pizza cutter. I mean, you could do the circular pizza cutter, but I do it with with those pizza cutters that look like a machete, basically. Just, or a long chef's knife. You can do it with that too, but make sure you take it out of the pan before cutting it. You don't want to kill your pizza pan, because that will damage your pan. And that's pretty much it. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. And bear with me, this is my first cooking video, so sorry again. Alright, have a good one.